right here, with part of it on the pavement. So part of it extended out over the pavement and part of it here, so it was, on the southbound lane and over.
Well, 11 o'clock every night, I take the dog out, do her business, go out in the patio there and I wait for her. On the night of June 28th, 14, I went out with her like every other night, standing on the patio, waiting for her. I'm looking toward the north and I see what appears to be searchlight. One of the lights was shining toward the west, one was shining kind of to the southeast, and they were just like scanning the sky both ways. And I'm standing there looking at this, and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's nothing up there. Usually they're for grand openings, and they bring them in on a flatbed truck, semi. I mean, that's how big those things are. So the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm wondering, what in the world are searchlights, two no less, that I could tell they were real close. And there's nothing up there but farmland. No businesses or nothing. It got my curiosity going. The searchlight that was looking toward the west merged with the light that was shining toward the southeast, and they merged together and they were stationary looking at something up in the sky. I looked to see, it just disappeared into the sky. I couldn't see anything that they were shining on. So I put the dog in the house, got my keys, went out in the car, and I'm gonna go up there and just see where these lights are. Driving north, and as soon as I crested a hill, I could see what appeared to be, to me, an automobile accident scene. Like, paramedics and fire department, everybody was there. That's just what I got from the lights. Looking at it, the red and white lights. I lowered the windows on the car because I assumed I'm going to talk to the sheriff and find out if there's a fatality, or maybe I knew somebody was in the accident, Well, as I started getting closer, there's no noise whatsoever, none. I could hear no diesel motors running or anything you would hear at an accident site like that. This craft had red and white lights around it, and it lifted up, kind of went off to the right, zigzagged a little bit, and then headed due north, maybe 200 to 300 feet in the air. It appeared that it was sitting in the middle of the road, but what I think it was sitting more off to the left of the road, the southbound lane. But the glare of the lights from it obliterated, any detail of what this thing looked like. Until it got in the air, and then I could tell it was circular and round. And it proceeded north. I took off after it, went through the dogleg turns, and it's still pretty good ways in front of me before we get up to Route 4. And it turned to the left, went over these pine trees, and then just shot away like a rocket, and it was just gone. Off to the west, I could just see a faint red light from it, but the acceleration was incredible. Up until that point, it was going slow, and at a low altitude. When it shot across the road, then it gained altitude because I could see it quite a ways to the west. I came back home, all shook up from what I just seen. The next morning, I called Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and talked to a guy, and he explained to him what I seen, that there was kind of a flying craft that was on a state route, State Route 56, and I thought they would be interested to know it was there. And he was pretty sarcastic with me and told me what I seen was exactly what I described. It was an accident scene, and what I seen leaving was a light flight helicopter. which I told him, no, you're not listening to me. You're not listening to what I said. I said it appeared that's what it was, but it wasn't that at all. There was no noise, there was no helicopter, and it certainly wasn't a helicopter, that's for sure. So then he put me on to another guy there, right, Pat, and that guy was nicer to talk to, and he told me to call Dayton International Tower, that they would have the radar loop on it. So I did, called the tower. The guy told me that he didn't work Saturday night, but he would talk to the guys that did work Saturday night and they'd get back with me on it. Well, nobody got back with me, you know, so during the day, then I went to the sheriff department, I went over to the Mechanicsburg police, I went different places to see if anybody had seen or if they had any chatter on their radios about what I seen. And nobody seen anything. When I came down over the hill, I seen it here. I came down maybe halfway down the hill, and that's when it lifted up, went up off to the right here, kind of zigzagged, and then headed north at only maybe 200 to 300 feet high. And that's when I took off and tried to follow it. Went around the turn, and it's pretty good ways in front of me as I was looking toward Route 4, and it turned over the pine trees there just before you get to Route 4. Shot to the west at lightning speed, just unbelievable speed.
As an investigator with Ohio MUFON at the time, I was put in touch with the witness 9 days after the event. We met at his house and he told me about what he had seen. We then retraced his path and visited the scene. The area is sparsely populated, made up of farmland, hills, and wooded areas with many creeks and ponds. At the scene, he showed me where the craft was sitting. We noticed a semicircle of grass wilted and bent over on the south side of the road. The dimensions were close to that of what the witness described the craft to be. At this point, it had been 10 days since the sighting. There had been several days of heavy rains recently. However, the same tall grasses lined both sides of the road, and there were no other spots like it. A Geiger counter was used, and grass and soil samples were taken for trace evidence. Nothing turned up. A neighbor mentioned seeing at dusk 2 low-flying black helicopters heading south with spotlights aimed down. Interviews with nearby residents turned up no other witnesses. There were no medical helicopters dispatched at the time. Due to the close proximity of trees and power lines, it's unlikely that a landing in the area would even be possible. Calls were placed to the tower at Dayton International Airport, but they were not returned.
Well, I asked him if he'd seen anything strange. He said yes. And I said, what'd you see? And he said 2 black helicopters going southbound, one on each side of 56, heading southbound at dusk. So that was the same evening that I seen it. So it's obvious they were looking for something. What are 2 of them, with light shining down from it? What are they doing at dusk flying down 56? There's no reason for that. Those are usually when they're doing a clandestine type thing, you know, where it's just not an everyday occurrence that you see something on a state route or a highway. Now, I didn't see the helicopters. I didn't see it. I probably heard them, but I hear there's helicopters right here all the time, you know. A lot of the green military helicopters flying, you know, over, making a hell of a lot of noise, maybe 5 or 6 of them at a time going over. So it's not uncommon, you know, for me. When they flew over, I probably didn't pay no attention to it at all. They were, you know, didn't mean anything to me, but they were outside. because they were cooking, grilling out and everything. The lights were so bright around it, like bright LED lights, that you couldn't make any detail. And it just fuzzed it out, you know. It wasn't until it went up that I could tell that it was round. And actually when I could see it going in front of me when I went around the last turn. The only time you could see the craft itself is between the lights. You could see it was just dark, real dark. And I remember like a bump on it. I don't know what that was, kind of a raised place in between those lights, and this thing was dark gray in color. Now that's totally ridiculous to think it was a drone. The only kind of a drone it could be would be a full-size military drone, a big one.
At 2:30 a.m., the morning of June 28, 2014, the National UFO Reporting Center received a sighting report 19 miles northeast of this location. It mentioned a similar-sized hexagon-shaped craft slowly moving over a highway. Could this have been the same craft and had it been parked in the area all day eluding searches? These answers are unknown. In the summer of 2015, 3 members of a family were terrified after an encounter while traveling this same road a few miles south. They reported a dark craft approximately 30 feet wide that approached their truck and hovered above it, close enough to almost touch. It was covered in lights and remained there as they sped away.
The longer the time span is from the time that you experienced the landing of this thing, you start remembering more. Your memory comes back to you about what happened that night. Right away, you are really thinking about the basics of it, not so much detail. What came back to me was almost like a dreamlike, hard to describe, but when I was sitting there in the car, it was kind of a dreamlike situation, you know. I mean, I wasn't dreaming or anything, but it just came over you in that way while I was looking at this thing, and as it took off. And I wasn't concerned at all about sitting on a state route and not getting hit. You know, you should be thinking that there's a possibility somebody's going to hit me. I never experienced any any traffic going either way, north or south, during this whole event. When it kind of zigzagged up into the air off to the right, went up, like I said, 200 to 300 feet or so, it gave me the impression of like it's going up a road, like it's going up a country road, you know. But at the time, you don't, it's like, you know better. You know there's no country road going up a hill because that goes down a hill. And it's an irrational thing to think about, you know, that we actually bought into that temporarily. So it was a weird mental thing, I'll put it that way. It just strange how it come over you, you know. And I couldn't sleep all that night, you know. I have nothing to gain, but I have a lot to lose by, you know, telling the story about what happened. But what I'm telling you is the God's truth. That's what happened, what it was, where it came from. I have